Can you imagine having 40 donor-related siblings? Yes, 40. And being excited about it? Well, today's guest is, and he will show you how everybody's experience is different. He has experienced so many things with his siblings, with his donor, in his childhood, and I'm not going to give it away. You're going to have to listen, but he is a wonderful young man, and I'm excited for you to meet him. Welcome to Building Your Family. This is a podcast about donor conception, surrogacy, and all the ways the modern family is built. My name is Lisa Schumann. I'm your host. I'm a therapist, I'm an author, I'm a researcher, and I am so excited today to talk to you about somebody who will give you a very different story than many of our guests. His name is Ben Sanderson, and he's an actor and a very talented actor, but his fame was preceded by his fame as a donor-conceived person. So I'm not going to tell you anymore. I'm going to introduce you to Ben, and he will tell you his amazing story about his donor conception journey and his many siblings. Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course, Lisa. Thank you for having me here.
I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm so happy to hear your story because I think what it really highlights is that so many people have very different donor conception journeys and very different experiences being donor conceived. And as you probably know, many people talk about the stress they feel about having so many donor conceived siblings, and yet you feel very differently about that.
Yes, I do.
So why don't we tell everyone your story and how this came to be and how you became a famous donor conceived person?
Well, the spark notes is that I am 19. I'm from Los Angeles, and I was born to my single gay mom who used a sperm donor to conceive me. My sperm donor donated anonymously, so my whole life it was just me and her living together, my mom and I. And I thought I was going to die never knowing his name or never knowing anything about him. But I was actually kind of okay with that. I was like, okay, I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy this was just me and my mom. So I was like pretty okay with that. But I always knew I could go looking for my half siblings.
And before you tell me that, I just want to interrupt you for 1 second. Your mother always told you that you had a sperm donor. She didn't tell you some
Yes.
story about
She
her having
never
sex
kept
with
it a
someone.
secret. I don't know how she would lie about it. I don't know, like you had a dad, he ran away.
Right. Yes, it could be anything.
Yeah, but she was always transparent to me my whole life.
Okay.
Anyway, I was 18 years old and I was sitting in this room that I'm sitting in right now. And I was like, wait, I'm 18. I can go looking for my half siblings. And I called my mom and we logged on to the website. And there was a message from one of my sisters from like 10 years ago. And she had left an email. And I was like, I don't even know if this is going to work. This is a long spark notes. I apologize.
That's fine. We want to hear.
And so I emailed it to her. I emailed her and I was like, hi, my name's Ben Sanderson. I'm from LA. Here's a picture of me. I felt like I was submitting for an audition. I'm 18. Here's my Instagram. I think I'm your brother. And I get a DM the next day on Instagram. I was with my friends and it was from my sister. And I was so happy. I was like, yay, I have a sister. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of other people start following me on Instagram and they're mutuals with my sister. And I thought to myself, oh, yay, my sister told her friends about me. Amazing new friends. And then I'm looking at pictures of them. I'm like, wait, they kind of look like me. And I was like,
Wow.
both these people are my siblings. And one of them reached out to me and it turned out to be a second sister. And she was like, wait, I should add you to the group chat of all of us. So we're so glad we found you. Before I add you, do you know how many there are of us? And I said, oh, no, but like max 10, right? And she said, no, there's 40 of us.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and she said, you're the youngest of all of us. I found out within like 10 seconds that I, one, had 40 siblings, and two, I was the youngest of all of them. And then I was added to the group chat, and here we are. Oh, and then a couple months ago, I made a TikTok account just as like a fun summer hobby. I posted like one video a day. I posted like a put a finger down style type of video, like put a finger down and then you kinda like say a story that has to do with your life. And I told this story and it blew up, Lisa. It blew up. Like, I think as of now, it has like 11.5 million views or
Oh
something.
my gosh.
And I started this TikTok account in June.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, and so now
Wow.
I get messages all the time from donor conceived people who are kind of seeing my story as like inspiration to try
Yes.
looking for your half siblings or taking a 23andMe test because you never know. And so yeah, here we are.
And then you ended up in People magazine. I saw there was a whole article about you in there.
Yeah, that was crazy just from one video.
Amazing. And were you upset about that? That you all of a sudden your life was on display?
No.
Mhm.
Of course not. Don't be silly.
Uh-huh.
That was
You're
awesome.
an actor, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's weird because it's like a lot of people are like, I could not stomach knowing that 11.5 million people have seen my face. And I'm like, oh, I don't,
You're okay with that, yes.
not to sound like a diva, but I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what are people asking you?
A lot of people ask me, "Hey, I'm donor conceived too. Do you think we're siblings?" No one's been a match yet. I usually ask for like identifying information about their donor. I don't give any of mine out. And it's usually not a match. A lot of people ask, "Are we
Mhm.
siblings?" I get a lot of messages from parents of donor conceived people, like moms who used a sperm donor or vice versa, and
Mhm.
they ask like for advice, like when should I tell my child they're donor conceived, or I'm raising my son without a dad, like I know you weren't raised with a dad, so how did you manage that? Like I get a lot of parents asking for advice. I get a lot of that. I just get a lot of messages being like your story's crazy.
It's remarkable that all of a sudden in, less than 24 hours, your life was turned totally upside down. You went from being this, single child with a mom, all of a sudden feeling like you have all these siblings.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting is with regard to the sibling, and we'll talk about the donor next, but just with regard to the siblings, immediately you were happy about it.
Oh,
Not everybody feels that way.
I know. A lot of people ask me, "Were you overwhelmed? Did you have to sit down?" Absolutely not. And I know I'm unique in that opinion. I was nothing but excited. I would like to acknowledge that I am in a very privileged position. Like I always knew I was donor conceived. It was always transparent to me. So I kind of had like 18 years to prepare for anything
Mhm.
that I
Mhm.
might find out when I turned 18. I always knew that I probably had half siblings. I always knew I could probably find them. So I had time to gear up. A lot of people unfortunately find out they're donor conceived and find out they have a million siblings in one day. And
Mm.
that is when I feel like it definitely becomes more overwhelming. For me in the position I was in, I felt nothing but excitement. I was so excited. That's the best fun fact ever.
It's
Ever. Yeah.
wonderful. That's great. Well, some of the research that we have says that many children, particularly only children, really enjoy having donor conceived siblings because they have siblings and then all of a sudden also they know other donor conceived people because
Yeah.
when you grow up donor conceived, usually your parent is not donor conceived and so you don't have that opportunity to look at somebody else and relate to them in that way. Do you feel that?
1000%. Yeah. I could count on one hand the amount of donor conceived people I knew before finding the 40. And not that I was necessarily longing for that connection, but like once you find out about 40 other people that are in the same situation as you, it's awesome, especially growing up as an only child. I remember waking up one night when I was like 7 years old crying like I want a brother, I want to.
Mm.
Yeah, so I was nothing but excited.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's so nice. And so I know that you're trying to help the other donor conceived siblings keep their anonymity and you don't
Yeah,
call them by name. You use a number to represent them. And some of them feel very open, others don't. Some feel that they want to share their information, some don't. And so you've been very respectful of them with regard to that.
1000%. A huge, I think, kind of learning curve with being donor conceived and being this in the public eye, it's kind of a new thing. Like, I always tell people, name a celebrity who's donor conceived. And most people can't. Some people can name one, maybe
Hmm.
two, but like, a lot of people who are in the public eye, and if they're donor conceived, they keep it a secret. I think a big part of that is keeping their privacy or their maternal family's privacy. And throughout this whole thing, I've really tried to keep it about my journey and my experience, because I don't want to represent my siblings' experiences because they're all different. Like, I am
Hmm.
one of 41 stories. One really tricky thing about doing the People magazine article and, talking about it online is it's really important to me to keep my siblings' privacy, because I am much more open about it than they are. And I don't want to tell anyone else's story. I just don't really feel like it's my place, especially since my donor donated anonymously. He did that for a reason. I cannot reveal anything about him online. A lot of people online ask, can I see pictures of the donor? Can I see
Oh,
pictures of
wow.
the sibling? Oh, I get that all the time. That's another thing I get. Like, that
Wow.
was like one of the top comments. Let's see pictures. And I always say, like, I can't. I'm sorry. Like,
Hmm.
I totally understand the curiosity. But it's just something, at least now, I can't do.
And so I would imagine that you probably see a bit of a range within all the donor siblings because you've been chatting with them about their experiences and you see very different experiences. Do you feel that most of them were told? Because if you're of the generation of people who we know now that it's important to tell and talk about it often and early. So do you feel that most of your siblings knew about this from a young age?
I'd say it's about 50-50.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd
Wow.
say it's about 50-50. I think that's the statistic. Yeah, about 50 of us, I'd say, knew from early childhood, and 50% of us found out after adulthood.
So you're the youngest. How old's the oldest?
There's 9 years of 40 of us. It's like a s'more. It's really, yeah.
Are the people who are older, do you find that they have more difficulty with their story, or is it doesn't really matter?
I don't think it really matters. Like I said, like, there's 41 stories. Like, and it really depends on so many different things. Like, I'm just one of 41 stories. I don't even know how to put this. I don't think it matters in terms of
Mhm.
age. Because we're not that far apart in age.
Right. But, 9 years ago, we had a very different story in donor conception. Now there's, a big push for openness, and it's very clear to most programs, most sperm banks, most fertility clinics that it's important to be open and honest with your children.
Yeah.
So even though mental health professionals knew that some time ago, it really wasn't so universally known until more recently. So I would imagine that it might be more difficult, but it sounds like you're saying there's just so many different stories and different
Yeah,
experiences.
it's really there's so many different experiences. It's really a case by case scenario for, I think, all donor conceived people.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
definitely.
And how did this start to unfold? Do you know the origins of how the 40 met each other, how the 40 got connected?
Well, I wasn't there.
Mhm.
I actually don't know. It was definitely a while ago. Like, I was really young. What I do know is that only a couple of them knew about each other, and then more people were added to the group, and then more, and then it turned out to be like 40. So there were like different, like,
Different layers.
there was like the apple core, and then there was a little bit more to the apple, and now it's
Mhm,
like an
mhm.
orchard.
Wow,
So I knew it was a very gradual, it wasn't like bam, 40.
that's so interesting. And you also mentioned that you feel like you're happy to be the youngest of 40.
1000%.
And why is that, Ben? Why do you feel that way?
Lisa, it's the best fun fact to be like, I have 40 siblings. And I'm the youngest of all of them. It's just the best little button to the fun fact. It's like, and you're the youngest. Like, what are the odds that I'm the youngest? Like, that's crazy.
Uh-huh.
Now, I will note, I might not be the youngest. We don't know, because it's only the 40 of us that we know about.
Mhm.
I asked a lot of my siblings, like, do you think I'm the youngest? And they're like, yeah, you're probably the youngest. I really hope I'm the youngest.
You wanna be the youngest brother? Is that it?
I just love being the youngest brother because I have, like, all these people to look up to and learn from and admire, and I don't know, I just love it, and all of my friends who knew me for years before any of this happened were like, "Oh, duh, you're the youngest." When you found out
Really?
I have 40 and I'm the youngest, they're like, "Oh, you totally give younger brother no question about it."
So will you be upset if you find out that there's someone younger?
For like 2 minutes, but then I'll be just as excited. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, "Wait, like, I don't have a younger sibling that I know about. That's crazy." I haven't thought about that. Because I tell people, I have 40 older siblings, curtain.
Right.
Wow, what would it be like to have a younger sibling? I don't know. I don't the idea of, like, someone being younger than me and looking up to me, I don't know, I haven't thought about that. They would be stealing my thunder, I will say.
Right.
It's just a lot of people say, like, it's so perfect that you're the one, like, telling, like, this story because you have such a unique perspective being the youngest and finding out
Mhm.
that you have 40 older siblings. Like, imagine finding out you have 17 older sisters and 23 older brothers. Crazy. That's a lot of bunk beds.
Yes, that's a lot of bunk beds, absolutely. And are any of those people siblings in the same family with each other?
Yes.
So for you, it's different. Like for them, they would have the experience of having their siblings that they grew up with, and then the donor siblings, and be able to see the difference in experience. For you, these are the only siblings you know.
Exactly. Yeah, I haven't thought about that either. Like, if I grew up with Lil Susie and it was just me, Susie, and my mom, what would that be like finding out with Susie that we had 40 siblings?
Yeah, Susie may feel differently.
Susie may feel differently than I do. Susie may be like, "Oh god, I don't want that's scary to
Right.
me," and I might be open arms, and that might cause, like, a discrepancy in some sort of relationship, but yeah, I haven't thought about that either. Because a
Hmm.
lot of people ask me, like, "Ben, like, do you view these people as your siblings? Like, really?" I'm like, "Yes, of course!" And I'm like, "Well, are they my cousins?" "No, they're my siblings." And they're like, no, that's not what I mean, Ben. Like, do you view them as siblings, like, you grew up with?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know what that's like.
Right.
I don't know what that's like."
Well, we had someone on this podcast who wrote a book about her experience. Her name's Kiara Shu, and she's also had a single mother. And she's very interested in her donor family, and her brother is not, that she grew up with from the same
Yeah,
donor. So you never know how people are going to feel. And you probably see so many different experiences
yeah.
with those 40. Some people are probably much more involved than the others, and there's all sorts of different experiences. And I assume that there are in different places of the country.
Oh, 1000%. We're sprinkled all throughout. Yeah.
And do you have an ongoing relationship? Do you talk to some of them often, or
Yeah, we have a group chat. We talk in it quite often. I talk in it quite often. That's definitely our main form of communication.
so I'd like to ask you a question that a lot of people ask, and this there's a lot of difference of opinion about this. But we find that some donor conceived people say, I wish my parents had connected with donor siblings when we were young. Like maybe as little kids, we could meet up at the playground and the parents knew each other and we could get together and the kids could grow up knowing each other. And then other people say, no, as a donor conceived person, that wasn't my choice. And so I really want to make that choice to reach out when I want to, and I want to own that decision. What's your perception?
I do have an opinion on this.
Hmm.
Before I say it, I'd like to know this is just my opinion. I'm not an expert. I'm
Of
just a
course.
person with an opinion.
Yes.
My mom and I were very much on the same page that we thought, and we still believe that this was the best way to go, that I should wait until I'm 18 to go looking for my paternal family. That's something we talked about when I was very young. I'm sure if I was like, "Mom, like, I'm begging to know my half sibling," she would have probably considered that heavily. Definitely. In my opinion, I think it's best to, if you're donor conceived, to not go looking until you become 18, because when you become 18, you can make your own boundaries. It's not about what's best for me and my mom, it's what's best for me as an adult man. I'm very happy I waited till I was 18 to focus on my relationship with my mom, who's my favorite person ever. I think if I was 6 years old and I found out about these other people who are a little bit older than me, but they're not in my family, but they're my siblings, I think that would have been a really confusing, and I think it would have just muddied the waters a little bit.
How so?
Maybe that wasn't the right phrase, but I think I really liked the way it worked out for me. I spent 18 years just completely my mom was my family. My mom was my family. And yes, I had, aunts and cousins and uncles on my mom's side, and they were my family. But being able to connect with my paternal family as an adult and having complete agency for myself was really nice. And I don't think that would have been the same if I mean, we would like to think it would be the same when I was younger, like when I was like a child or a minor. But I was still living with my mom, and it's like, well, what does that mean to connect with an entire other half of your family while you're still going to school and, learning math? And my brain's still developing. I couldn't, you know, I don't know, just I don't think that would have been tangible to me. I think that would have just been really kind of confusing. Does that make sense? Am I
Yes,
wording
sure, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. My name is Lisa Schumann. I'm a therapist, a researcher, an author, and I am passionate about helping people find a better journey to parenthood. I created the Center for Family Building to help people understand how to make decisions, not just for the short term, but for a lifetime. We have group counseling, individual counseling, couples counseling, and lots of other services that can help people find the answers that they're looking for. Just take a look at our website so you can see a few of the thousands of people we helped build a better path to parenthood. The decisions you make are too important to leave up to chance. Arm yourself with the right information. Take a look at our website and sign up for a session with one of our therapists, join one of our groups, or access one of our programs, and you will quickly see why our strategies are so effective. Now back to our episode. And then what about your donor? So you also met your donor. Was that before before the siblings?
No, so I connected with the siblings, and the first night I connected with them, they were like, "Oh, by the way, we know our donor. Some of us are in contact with him. Do you want his email?" And I was like, "Oh, totally. Like, that'd be awesome." And they were like, "Yeah, you can email him." And I did, and he emailed back, and it was awesome. And now, every couple of months we'll just talk. I've never met him face to face or in person or on video chat like this or anything. We mainly just email, but yeah, that was awesome. Like hearing back. That was crazy.
Mm,
I thought I would never, ever know what he looked like, communicated with him, know his name, anything. That was just awesome. I was riding my bike to class and I was checking the time to see if I was late for class. I'm like, who's this? And I almost like fell off my bike.
wow.
I was
Wow.
late I was late for class, but I was like, "Oh, that doesn't matter."
Yes.
Oh my gosh, and yeah, so that was awesome.
Was he given the option to be semi-known or known at 18 or anonymous? Do you know if he was given that option or he was just anonymous because he wanted to be?
This part of the story happened before I showed up, so I'm gonna be careful to make not get anything wrong. He definitely donated anonymously. One of my siblings got in contact with him somehow. I was, like, really young when that happened. And he was totally open, and he totally throws the ball back to those who choose to reach out to him. Those that don't reach out to him, he's like, "Oh, totally cool." I think what's really great about this is it really is an art, respecting everyone's boundaries because everyone's boundaries and experiences are so different.
Yes.
I had no problem reaching out to my donor. A lot of donor conceived people are like, I don't need to. I have a great maternal family, and not that I don't have a great maternal family. So
Mhm.
totally want to make that clear. But I was like, oh my god, like this opportunity is crazy. So many donor conceived people whose donor donated anonymously would like kill to have this opportunity. So I was like, "Oh, I'll just email." If he doesn't email back, no big deal. um, but he did, and it meant so much to me.
And so you had no expectations of what he would say or if he would be open to connecting with you or anything like that.
I had an idea that he would throw the ball back and be open, want a connection because that was like a similar response that my siblings had got. So I had an idea that it was gonna be like that. He emailed back and it was totally loving, so open. It was just awesome. And
Wow.
we won't be meeting in person for a long time just because of location discrepancies.
Mhm.
But I do want to meet him before I die.
I know that a lot of people are curious about this. So, growing up, did you wonder about him? Did you wonder, I wonder what he looks like? I wonder if he's also interested in the arts, like any of that?
1000%. It was weird because a part of me was dying to know what he looked like, and was dying to know if I looked like him, and was dying to know how artistic he was, and just dying to know all of that. But at the same time, I could never truly let myself wish that hard because I knew there was a really big chance that I would never know.
Mm.
And if I wished that hard, if I let myself wish that hard and I never found out, I would be heartbroken. So I kind of grew up being like, okay, there's a really big chance I will never know what he looks like, his name or anything. I will never get in contact with him. And this sounds sad, but I was like, okay, I have to deal with that. Like,
Just made peace with it.
I just have to make peace with it. He did a very nice thing. I'm thankful to be alive. My mom and I have a great relationship. He like helped create our family. I mean, my mom definitely did all of the heavy lifting. He just donated sperm.
Mhm,
But,
mhm.
so I was like, he did something for my family. If all it takes for me to pay it back is respecting his privacy, I can do that. So I had to make peace with it. So when I found out that I could contact him, I was like, okay, cool. That's awesome. It felt like a bonus.
Wow.
What's really interesting is when my mom bought the sperm, they offered her like an audio of him talking for like 20 minutes for like $25 more. It was
Mhm.
like a side of fries that she liked. And I listened to it for the first time when I was 18. My mom had always had it, but I never got around to it. And I listened to it, and we have a very similar speaking voice, very similar. And the way
Wow.
we talk. But the thing that blew my mind and blew all of my friends' minds is that we have the exact same laugh. Isn't that
Hmm.
crazy?
Mhm,
We have
mhm,
the exact same laugh. I never knew because like laughs, like you learn to talk from your parents, so you would think you would learn to laugh from your parents.
mhm.
Well, I did learn to laugh, I guess, through my dad, but that blew my mind. That was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, I definitely get the theater stuff from my mom. That was a discovery too. I don't know where actor or singer came from because neither of them are that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that
That's so
just
interesting.
guess it was a recessive gene.
Mhm, mhm. But that probably gave you some closure, I would imagine
Oh,
that.
1000%, yeah.
And as you were growing up, because I'm wondering about the developmental phases that people go through, did you have different times in your life where you were thinking like, "Oh, I wonder if my dad, you know, went through puberty the same way I did or at the same age I did had had, the same inclination for math or English or the same interest in whatever or also liked to go bike riding or also liked dogs." Did you have those sorts of thoughts?
Not really, and I didn't realize that until you just said it. No, I really didn't. Ma should I have?
No, no, not at all.
Wow, I never thought that I don't know, I think it just came down to, like, I can't let myself think too much about it just in case it doesn't work out. I think it just really
I
came down to
see.
I remember the first time I had to shave, and I just remember being like, "Oh god, like, I don't know how to do this. My mom doesn't know how to do this." I remember thinking that the first time I had to shave, I was like, "Oh god, like, my dad had to learn this, and he probably had a dad in the home. I was like, "Oh god, I don't know what I'm doing here." I remember thinking that, but it was
Mhm.
kinda like I wonder how my dad shaved when he was my age.
Right. Or if
I
he
just
was very
think
hairy or not.
yeah, I remember that being a check mark of like or like a checkpoint of like, oh, thinking about my dad, my donor, having to shave, not growing up with like a male figure, having to shave for the first time was definitely like a chapter or like a checkpoint.
Mm.
I remember that. Were there other times in my life when when I thought about, oh, I wonder if my dad was like this? Not that I can recall.
Mhm. And what about as you were growing up? Do you think that if you, let's say, had a father, that it might be a different sort of experience for you? Because I would imagine that some of your donor siblings, maybe some of them had a father with male infertility, and
Yes.
that was a different sort of experience.
A lot of people ask me, why do I call my donor dad? And this is my response. I was not raised with a dad in the home
Mhm.
for multiple reasons. My mom's single, she's gay, never would have happened.
Mhm.
But if I had any male figure in my life at all that kind of raised me or I looked up to in that way, he would be my dad and my donor would be my donor. But because I didn't, and the dad label's kinda open,
Mhm.
I guess he wins it by default.
Uh-huh.
A lot of donor conceived people do not call their donor dad. At least of
Mhm.
what I'm finding. I don't know, I think it's fun.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I'd call him that to his face because I don't wanna freak him out. I guess I've always had a weird thing in the back of my mind, like, how would my life be different if I was raised with a male figure? Like, if I had, like, a male figure to look up to. I think about that. I wouldn't say I ever wished for that, but I definitely think, like, how would my life be different if I had that?
Mhm.
I think if I had that, I would have had less of a strong drive to reach out to my donor.
Oh.
I still probably would've, because that would've been awesome.
Mhm. Mhm.
And of course, I'm saying that as a hypothetical, and if that were the truth, it could have been I could have felt completely
Mhm.
different than how I'm
Just
saying.
how you
I don't know, just that's just my hypothesis, but a lot of people ask, like, "How does your mom feel about all this?" And I'm like, "She's great." She's been my
Mhm.
number one supporter of all of this throughout all of this. But I think a lot of people do ask that because 'cause they're like, "Well, does your mom feel like you're betraying her or that you're not happy or you want more in a family?" Absolutely not. Absolutely not. My mom is like my rock, my number one person.
Oh, that's lovely.
1000%. Me wanting a connection with my paternal family has nothing to do with her. If I had a male figure in my life that I call dad, and then I, like, tried to reach out to my donor, I feel like those questions would be increased by 3. "Well, how does your dad feel about this? How does the man who raised you feel about this?"
Right.
Kind of this kinda, like,
It'd be a different
pointed
experience.
finger mentality of, like, "Are you not satisfied with what you grew up with?" No, I don't think
Mhm.
sorry, I keep yapping away when you ask
Mhm.
me.
No, 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 it's great. It's so helpful. I think it's all of this is so helpful, Ben, because I think it really illustrates this idea that even in our research, when we say donor conceived people feel X, Y, and Z, we can't say everybody feels the same way about anything.
Yeah,
Everybody's individual. Everybody has different experiences. I mean, who would think you'd have 40 siblings and be happy about it, but you're thrilled,
yeah,
right? And you were very happy to meet your donor, and yet it sounds like you didn't have that longing for him. You didn't go through each developmental stage thinking, oh, I wonder if my donor also likes math or likes theater, or I wonder if he also rode his bike to school, or those sorts of things didn't come up for you because your life was kind of formed, it sounds like, around you and your mom, and you kind of made that your life,
yeah,
knowing that you might not have another piece of your life to look at some point.
correct.
So that's how you developed. And I think it's great that you're being so true to yourself and very clear to the world, because we all need to hear this. We all need to hear when people feel anxious about subjects, they very often want to pigeonhole, well, you have to do X, Y, and Z. But we need to all know that people are different and respect that everybody's experience is different, right?
Yeah.
Do you know if your donor has children of his own?
You can never be too sure,
Mhm.
but I don't believe he does.
Mhm.
I
Okay.
definitely think he would have told us.
Mhm. So he knows about all 41 of you.
I'm not too sure about that because
Oh,
he's made it very clear. He donated anonymously, and it's kind of a miracle that we're connected to him. So I can only speak for my relationship with him. He really wants to prioritize individual connections. Not everyone has reached out to him. So I think he wouldn't know about the ones that they
he
haven't.
never heard from.
Yeah. So if you reach out to him, he'll totally throw the ball back, but he's not going to force anyone to be in contact with him if that's not what they want. He's also very great with boundaries and privacy, and so I don't know. I
Mm,
know he knows about me, and that's all that matters.
right, that's your story.
Yeah.
Did he ever share with you, or do you have any opinion about why he or maybe other donors, because you've spoken to other people who are donor conceived, would change their mind? They start out wanting to be anonymous, and then they connect with donor offspring.
I honestly don't know about, other stories like that. We contacted him, it wasn't the other way around. So
Hmm. Right.
I actually don't know the full story of how someone got in contact with him, but I think someone did, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, sure." I think when you donate, especially since a lot of the donor industry kind of like will advocate on college campuses, and a lot of people donate when they're in college and they're young. Like they'll just be like, "Oh, I'll donate anonymously," and then when you're middle aged, you're like, "Wait, do I have kids?" Like that means
Mm.
something. That
Mm.
means,
Hmm.
but that's just my theory. I can't speak for my father. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in his mind. For me, if I donated anonymously and then I was contacted by my future kids somehow, and then I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I think it would just come down to like, I think it's just that we're in a different world because there's 23andMe and Ancestry and all these
Hmm.
technology. You can't really donate anonymously anymore.
Right.
I think it's just
Exactly.
kinda like, "Oh, well," because I've heard stories of, donor can see people trying to reach out to their donor and their donor's like, "F off." Like, "I
Right.
don't want to deal with this," and that is devastating.
Yes.
I think it really comes down to it's just a different world. Donor anonymity is becoming much more taboo and much more something that's being advocated against naturally and purposefully because of 23andMe and Ancestry, but also, it could be dangerous in a lot of situations
Hmm.
and
Yes.
for mental health and physically, if you don't know your donor conceived, that's really dangerous. And I think it's just a matter of it's a different world. It's a very different world when he donated than it is when I emailed him saying I want a connection. I
Yes.
guess that's my answer. I can't speak for him. I don't know, but I think maybe that's what it might come down to.
I just wanted to ask you one last question, Ben. I am curious about, because right now we're in a situation where many people are advocating for donor limits, family limits, and that sort of thing, and the laws are changing. They just changed in Colorado. So there are these groups who are really pushing for legislation for that to happen, to have updated medical information from donors, so that, let's say, the donor donates at 25 and he's healthy, but maybe 30 he gets cancer, so that way he can reach out, or you can have the clinic or the family reach out to him and find out, and so that way you could be notified of these things. How do you feel about all of that? And of course that would change your experience of having 40 siblings.
I think donor anonymity is something that should become abolished, frankly.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I'm 19, I'm not an expert, but I just think we've heard more and more stories about how it's negatively affected the mental health, physical health. of donor conceived people to keep it a secret from them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say this. I think the best scenario ultimately is the donor should be anonymous until the person becomes 18. And then it is the donor's choice if they want to find out or not. I don't know how that would happen. I don't know. I'm not a politician. But it really hurts the mental health of donor conceived people if they don't know where they came from. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then especially if they think they knew where they came from and one day out of nowhere, they find out their dad isn't their biological dad or their mom isn't their biological mom, and they find out about all these people, like, that can be traumatic.
Yes.
And I think if the parents who used a sperm donor or an egg donor knew that when the child became 18, they would find out they were donor conceived, that would significantly decrease the amount of parents that keep that information to themselves, to the hiding that from their child,
Mm-hmm.
because they would know one day they would find out eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, of course, there is the thing no one wants to talk about is like, what if you accidentally, you know,
Date your
become,
sibling.
yeah, date your sibling.
It's happened.
Yeah, it has happened, and that is a huge, huge fear. My oldest sister and I grew up in the same town at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God I turned out the way I did because isn't that crazy?
Oh, yeah, I see it all the time. We just had somebody on this podcast, and her kids are in the same math class as their donor sibling. There was a woman in my town who just discovered that her high school boyfriend was her half brother. So
Yeah.
it happens quite a bit, and we don't talk about it all the time, but it does happen.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, I think the best step forward is to slowly require that the information is given to donor conceived people when they become 18.
Their donor information.
Yeah, their donor information, yes.
Hmm.
And then it's
And
their choice if they wanna know or not.
and you would advocate for limiting the number of siblings.
Probably, but also saying that, am I being a hypocrite? Because then I wouldn't be alive. So,
Yeah, it's a tough one.
it's a tough one. Definitely limiting the number of siblings, maybe not doing 2 in the same area would also not hurt. Again, I'm not an expert, I'm just a person with an opinion.
Mhm.
I definitely think it should be a limit, and then ending donor anonymity would also significantly help. Yeah, that's what I think.
Very interesting. Well, you're a very wise young man, Ben, and I'm so grateful to have you on this podcast because people really need to hear your story. And I'm so happy to hear your story that you feel so happy about your siblings and happy about your donor, your dad, and that you and your mom are so excited about all of this. It's just a lovely story. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Of course, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I had so much fun.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And hopefully we'll be in touch and we'll be in touch with you in the future and see how all of this continues to unravel. And hopefully you'll be able to stay the youngest. We hope that works out for you.
Yes, yes. One last thing I want to say before I get off this podcast is I really want to thank you, Lisa, for everything that you do and have done and will continue to do for people like me and people like my mom who want to create their dream family. And that's not something that people could have done 100 years ago. And you are one of the reasons that more and more people are able to build their dream families because of the work you do, because of the research you do. I was researching you before I got on this podcast. I was doing my homework and I was just reading about you and I was like, this woman is magical. She's awesome. Like
Oh, that's so
going,
sweet.
no. Like going in front of the Senate and like speaking about, I don't want to say this issue because, like my story is great, but this, how big of a deal being donor conceived and donor conception is in America and how far we've come and celebrating that, but also really pushing for how much farther we need to go. And you are such a trailblazer for that.
Oh, thank
Not a
you.
lot of people are, and I don't blame them because it's not talked about. And so I just want to thank you so much for talking about it and having me on this podcast to share my story. And it just really means a lot to me. And I didn't want to get off this podcast without saying that.
Oh, thank you, Ben, so much. That means a lot. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. And where can people reach you, Ben? Where would you like people to reach out to you?
Sure. So I am on Instagram and TikTok at the Ben Sanderson. I'm mostly on those two apps. If you want to see the video I talked about, you have to scroll a little bit down, but I posted it like the end of July or second to last weekend of July or something like that. That's at the Ben Sanderson, and so is my Instagram.
Okay, great. All right. So, all of you, if you have more questions, if I haven't covered everything, please reach out to Ben. He's lovely, as you can see, and he's happy to answer your questions. And thank you so much for listening to this very important conversation. And I hope you subscribe because that's how we keep going. So, thank you so much for your time, and I will see you next week. Hi, it's Lisa Schumann. I hope that you enjoyed that video and I hope it helped you. And if it did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe because that's how we keep going. It's really important to us. And if you liked it, you might like this one.